Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez's midnight shift at Lunar Base Tranquility's communications hub had been utterly routine until the quantum receiver erupted with activity. The distinctive triple-pulse signature of Zarkaxian technology, something she'd only seen in training simulations, lit up her holographic display like a Christmas tree. "That can't be right," she muttered, running a diagnostic. The Zarkaxians hadn't transmitted anything to Earth in 23 years, not since the armistice of Neptune. The proud warrior species had retreated to their territory after their defeat, choosing isolation over cooperation. The quantum receiver pulsed again, more urgently this time. Maria's fingers flew over the haptic interface, authenticating the signal. Her eyes widened as the encryption markers checked out. This was a genuine transmission from the Zarkaxian High Command itself. The message began to decode, and Maria's blood ran cold. The first words weren't in the harsh, clicking language of the Zarkaxians, but in perfect English. "We were wrong. Earth, we need your help." The voice belonged to Supreme Admiral Vexkar himself, the legendary commander who had personally surrendered to Earth forces 2 decades ago. His usual imperial tone was gone, replaced by something Maria had never heard in a Zarkaxian voice before. "Fear. Our son." Static interrupted the transmission, destabilizing at an unprecedented rate. "Our attempts to. Catastrophic failure. Millions already evacuated." More static crackled through the speakers. "Earth, you possess technology we once scorned as primitive. We now believe. Our only hope." A deafening screech cut through the transmission as another voice broke in, speaking rapid-fire Zarkaxian. Maria's translation software struggled to keep up. "Admiral, the containment field is collapsing. We need to evacuate the command center now." The transmission switched to visual, showing the Zarkaxian command center bathed in an ominous red glow. Through the massive viewing windows behind Vexkar, Maria could see their sun, a churning, angry mass of plasma, nothing like the stable star it should have been. Solar flares lashed out like writhing tentacles, while the star's surface boiled with massive sunspots. "Earth," Vexkar continued, his silver scales reflecting the crimson emergency lights, "we understand if you refuse. Our actions during the war were unforgivable. But we ask not for ourselves alone." The camera panned to show thousands of Zarkaxian civilians huddled in evacuation shelters, many of them children. "Our next generation should not pay for the crimes of their ancestors." The transmission deteriorated further as alarms blared in the background. The last clear image showed Vexkar performing the Zarkaxian gesture of ultimate humility, pressing his ceremonial blade against his own throat, offering his life to those he addressed. "Help us," he whispered, "or 40 billion souls will." The transmission cut to static. Maria sat frozen for exactly 2 seconds before slamming her hand down on the emergency protocols button. Klaxons blared throughout Lunar Base Tranquility as she transmitted the message directly to Earth's United Council and the Sol System Defense Force. As she waited for a response, Maria pulled up the astronomical data from the Zarkaxian sector. The readings confirmed their worst fears. The Zarkaxian homestar was showing signs of critical instability, its magnetic field fluctuating wildly in patterns that defied normal stellar physics. Her quantum receiver pinged again. A message from Earth Command, marked with the highest priority designation she'd ever seen. As she opened it, Maria realized she was witnessing a moment that would change human history. The question was, would humanity extend a helping hand to their former enemies, or let ancient grudges condemn billions to death? The fate of 2 civilizations now hung in the balance, all because of a desperate call in the dark of space. Captain Alexandra Alex Hayes stood before the United Council chamber in New Geneva, her dress uniform pristine except for the gleaming Medal of Valor that seemed to weigh heavily on her chest. The jagged scar running from her left temple to jaw caught the morning light streaming through the chamber's crystalline dome, a permanent reminder of the day Zarkaxian plasma fire had killed her parents and nearly claimed her life. "Distinguished counselors," she began, her voice steady despite the chaos of competing arguments filling the chamber. 23 years ago, I watched my parents' ship dissolve in Zarkaxian weapons fire. I was 15, serving as a cadet on their support vessel. Today, I'm asking permission to save the very people who took them from me. The chamber fell silent. Even Council President Chen stopped typing on his quantum tablet, fixing Hayes with an unreadable expression. The Prometheus isn't just Earth's most advanced vessel, Hayes continued, bringing up a holographic display of her ship. She's the only ship in known space with both the drive capacity to reach Zarkax Prime in time and the stellar manipulation technology to possibly save their son. Yes, we'd be risking our greatest technological achievement. Yes, they're our former enemies. But this isn't about them anymore. She gestured to the rear of the chamber, where the public observation deck was packed with journalists and dignitaries from a dozen alien races. This is about who we are. Every spacefaring civilization is watching Earth right now, wondering if humanity's talk of peace and progress was real or just convenient rhetoric after our victory. Counselor Jackson, her most vocal opponent, stood up. With all due respect, Captain, you're asking us to send our most advanced ship into former enemy territory based on a single distress call. This could be a trap. It's not. Hayes interrupted, keying in a command. The holographic display shifted to show surveillance footage from 3 different neutral species observation posts. The Zarkaxian sun churned violently, its surface a maze of massive sunspots and plasma storms. These readings were confirmed by our own long-range sensors 10 hours ago. Their star is dying, and it's dying faster than any natural process should allow. She paused, letting the implications sink in. We've detected over 2,000 refugee ships already fleeing the system. The Zarkaxians aren't faking this catastrophe. They're running for their lives. President Chen leaned forward. And you believe the Prometheus can actually stabilize their son? The combined research team from MIT Delhi and the European Space Agency believe so. We've successfully tested the stellar manipulation arrays on Jupiter's atmospheric storms. The principles are similar, just on a larger scale. A much larger scale, Counselor Jackson interjected. If you fail, we lose our most advanced ship and crew. Hayes squared her shoulders. If we don't try, we lose something far more valuable. Our humanity. She touched the scar on her face. I hated them for years, but my parents didn't die fighting for revenge. They died fighting for a better future, one where former enemies could become allies. The Zarkaxians took my family from me. Now they're asking for help to save theirs. What we do next will define Earth's place in the galaxy for generations. The chamber erupted in heated debate. Through it all, Hayes stood at attention, her expression neutral but her eyes intense. She watched President Chen consulting quietly with his advisors, knowing the fate of billions hung on their decision. Finally, Chen raised his hand for silence. Captain Hayes, if we approve this mission, how soon can the Prometheus launch? 1 hour, sir. My crew is already aboard, and the stellar manipulation arrays are prepped. We just need your word. Chen looked around the chamber one last time, then straightened in his chair. Let the record show that on this day, Earth chose mercy over memory, hope over hatred. Captain Hayes, the Prometheus is cleared for emergency launch. Go save some lives. As Hayes saluted and turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of the alien observers. Their expressions ranged from surprise to admiration. Earth was about to show the galaxy what humanity truly stood for. She had a ship to catch. The Prometheus cut through the darkness of space, its quantum drive leaving a ghostly blue trail through the debris field of what had once been the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Captain Hayes stood at the bridge's observation window, watching the twisted hulks of ancient warships drift past like mechanical icebergs. Detecting multiple radiation spikes, Captain, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Wong reported from his sensor station. The fallout from the quantum torpedoes is still active after all these years. Hayes nodded grimly. Plot a course through the clear zones, We can't afford any radiation damage to the stellar manipulation arrays. She turned to her XO. Commander Garcia, what's our status on the refugee signals? 3 distinct distress beacons, all Zarkaxian civilian vessels, Garcia replied, his holographic display showing red dots against the star map. They're running silent, probably hiding from multiple contacts. Wang's voice cut through the bridge. 6 vessels, pirate configuration. They're moving to intercept the nearest refugee ship. Hayes' scared face hardened. Show me. The main view screen lit up with thermal imagery of sleek, predatory ships surrounding a bulky Zarkaxian transport. The pirates were flying cobbled-together vessels that combined stolen technology from a dozen species, the vultures of space, taking advantage of the chaos. Rules of engagement, Captain, Garcia asked quietly. They both knew helping the Zarkaxians wasn't part of their mission parameters. Hayes touched the medal of valor on her chest. The Prometheus doesn't sail past people in need, Commander. Not anymore. She straightened in her command chair. Battle stations. Bring us in between the pirates and that transport. Let's show them why Earth ships have such a fearsome reputation. The Prometheus's quantum drive flared as it accelerated, its advanced stealth systems allowing it to close the distance before the pirates realized they were no longer alone. When they finally detected the Earth vessel, it was already too late. This is Captain Alexandra Hayes of the Earth ship Prometheus. Her voice boomed across all frequencies. You are engaged in illegal actions against civilian refugees. Stand down or be disabled. The pirates responded with a barrage of plasma fire, which splashed harmlessly against the Prometheus's shields. Hayes allowed herself a small smile. Target their engines only, she ordered. Precise shots, no collateral damage. Let's make a point. The Prometheus's point defense arrays came alive, sending precise quantum pulses that carved through the pirates' shields like paper. Within 30 seconds, all 6 hostile ships were drifting, their engines cold and dead. Open a channel to the Zarkaxian transport, Hayes commanded. The view screen showed the transport's bridge, where a female Zarkaxian stood rigid with shock, her silver scales dulled with exhaustion. Behind her, Hayes could see children huddled together, refugees from the dying star. This is Captain Nextali, the Zarkaxian said formally. We did not expect aid from an Earth vessel. Times change, Captain Nextali, Hayes replied. We'll escort you and the other transports to safe space. You have my word. A small Zarkaxian child pushed forward to the screen, his scales still showing the pearl sheen of youth. Are you really humans? The ones who beat the old empire? Hayes felt her throat tighten. The child was about the same age she had been during the war. Yes, we are. But we're not here to fight anymore. We're here to help. The child's next words stopped her cold. My grandfather says he's sorry about the war. He cries sometimes about the things he did. Before Hayes could respond, Wang called out again. Captain, detecting massive gravitational distortions ahead. The war's aftermath has turned this whole sector into a minefield. Hayes turned back to the screen. Stay close to our wake, Captain Nextali. The Prometheus will get your people through safely. She closed the channel and faced the graveyard of ships stretching before them. Somewhere beyond this battlefield lay Zarkax Prime, and a chance to turn ancient enemies into something new. Take us in, Helm, she ordered. Slow and steady. We've got precious cargo to protect. The Prometheus dropped out of quantum space into hell. The first thing Hayes saw was the sun, a roiling, angry mass of plasma that dominated the view screen, its surface churning with massive solar flares that dwarfed anything in Earth's historical records. My God, Garcia whispered, his dark eyes reflecting the crimson glare. The star's magnetic field is completely destabilized. Multiple orbital platforms falling into the atmosphere, Wang reported, his fingers dancing across his console. Zarkaxian ships are attempting evacuation, but their shields are failing under the radiation. Hayes watched as a massive solar observation post, easily twice the size of Earth's largest space station, broke apart under the assault of another solar flare. Its fragments burned like meteors as they entered the atmosphere, creating streaks of fire across Zarkax Prime's sky. Priority transmission from the surface, Communications Officer Patel announced. It's Supreme Admiral Vexkar. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the legendary Zarkaxian commander. His silver scales had dulled with age since the war, but his eyes still held the same intensity Hayes remembered from historical footage of the surrender. Prometheus, he said, managing to keep his voice steady despite the chaos visible behind him. Your arrival is unexpected, though perhaps not undeserved, given our history. Hayes stepped forward. We're here to help, Admiral. The Prometheus carries experimental stellar manipulation technology that might be able to stabilize your sun. A crash echoed through the transmission as another tremor shook the command center. Vexkar's expression hardened. Captain Hayes, I must warn you. The High Command is divided on accepting Earth's aid. General Kexity leads a faction that would rather see our civilization die with dignity than. The transmission suddenly cut off as a new voice broke in, harsh and filled with rage. This is General Kexity to the Earth vessel. You will leave our space immediately. We reject your so-called aid. Hayes signaled Podle to split the screen, showing both transmissions. On one side, Vexkar's command center was filled with civilians and scientists working desperately to evacuate. On the other, Kexty stood in what appeared to be a military bunker, surrounded by armed troops. General, Hayes kept her voice diplomatic. Your son will go nova within days. We have the technology to help. Help. Kexty spat the word. Like you helped when you destroyed our fleet, when you forced us to surrender our empire. No, human. If Zarkax Prime must die, we die without becoming your vassals. Enough. Vexkar's voice cut through the argument. General, I hereby relieve you of command under Emergency Protocol 7. Security Forces, Arist. The sound of weapon fire came through Vexkar's transmission. The Admiral ducked as plasma bolts scared the wall behind him. Captain Hayes, Kexty's forces are attempting to seize control of our remaining defensive platforms. If they succeed, they'll try to destroy the Prometheus. Hayes finished. She turned to her crew. Battle stations. Wong, get me a firing solution on those platforms' command nodes. Garcia, begin deploying the stellar arrays. We're not leaving. Multiple Zarkaxian warships powering up weapons, Wong reported. They're taking sides, half with Vexkar, half with Kexty. The view screen filled with the sight of Zarkaxian ships facing each other, brother against brother, while their sun continued its march toward destruction. A massive solar flare erupted, bathing everything in bloody light. Hayes touched her scar, then straightened her uniform. Open a channel to all Zarkaxian ships. Channel open. This is Captain Hayes. Look at your sun. Look at your world. In the time we've spent arguing, another 1 million of your people have been forced to evacuate. Your children are watching their home die while you debate pride versus survival. She paused, letting her words sink in. We're deploying our stellar arrays. Shoot us down if you must. But know that you're choosing death over a future for your people. The Prometheus stands ready to help. The choice is yours. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant rumble of another orbital platform breaking up in the atmosphere. The next few minutes would determine the fate of both the mission and an entire civilization. Hayes could only hope they chose wisely. The Grand Council chamber of the Zarkaxian Science Ministry buzzed with agitation as Captain Hayes strode past rows of holographic displays showing their son's death throes. Supreme Admiral Vexkar had managed to maintain control, but barely. General Kexty's supporters had been confined to their ships, fingers hovering over weapon triggers. Impossible. Chief Scientist Mexera hissed, her scaled fin rising in agitation as she studied the Prometheus' proposed solution. You suggest we treat a dying star with primitive probes, like applying bandages to a plasma burn. Hayes walked to the center of the chamber, where an ornate fountain depicted the Zarkaxian solar system in flowing water. Without warning, she reached into the fountain and grabbed a handful of the sacred ceremonial stones from its base. Several guards stepped forward, weapons raised, but Vexkar waved them back. "Watch," Hayes commanded, letting the stones fall one by one into the water. Each created ripples that intersected and changed the fountain's flow. "Your scientists proposed using one massive energy shield to contain the solar flares, but that's like trying to dam a river with a single wall." She dropped another stone. When the pressure builds up, the water pattern suddenly disrupted, spraying several nearby scientists. Hayes continued, "But what if we use hundreds of small probes, each making tiny adjustments to the star's magnetic field?" She began dropping stones in a precise pattern. The water's flow gradually stabilized into a peaceful current, like acupuncture on a cosmic scale. "You dare compare our sun to a human medical practice?" Another scientist sputtered. "I dare to offer a solution that might work," Hayes shot back. "Your own simulations show the shield will fail. We've got less than 72 hours before your sun goes nova, so you can either stand there being offended, or you can help us save your world." Mexera's fins flattened, a sign of deep thought among her species. "The energy requirements for so many probes will be met by the Prometheus's quantum core," Hayes finished. "Each probe carries a fraction of our ship's power, creating a web of magnetic influence around your sun. Working together, they can gradually reshape its magnetic field, like—" She paused, knowing her next words would either win them over or start a riot. "Like your ancient ring sailors taming solar winds with thousands of small sails." The chamber fell silent. The ring sailors were legendary figures in Zarkaxian history, brave explorers who had first mastered their sun's energy using vast solar sails. By invoking them, Hayes had just compared humanity's solution to one of their most sacred traditions. Vexkar stepped forward, his aged scales gleaming in the emergency lights. "You studied our history." "Know your enemy," Hayes replied. "That's what we both believed during the war. But now," she gestured to the holographic displays of the dying sun, "maybe it's time we knew each other as allies instead." Mexera moved to the fountain, studying the pattern Hayes had created with the stones. The calculations would need to be precise. A single probe out of position could disrupt the entire network. "Then it's a good thing Zarkaxians are known for their precision," Hayes said. "We'll handle the deployment and power distribution. Your scientists can calculate the optimal positions for magnetic field manipulation." She turned to face the assembled aliens. "This only works if we work together." A younger scientist stepped forward, his scales still showing traces of pearl. "The probe network, it's like the grand orchestra." "Explain," Vexkar commanded. "In our classical music, no single instrument dominates. Thousands of tiny sounds combine to create something greater." The young scientist's fins rippled with excitement. "This plan is music to save a sun," Hayes finished softly. Mexera straightened. "I will need your probe schematics. We have 70 hours to compose this symphony of survival." She paused, then performed the slight bow of one scientist acknowledging another. "Perhaps humans aren't as primitive as we once thought." Hayes allowed herself a small smile. "We'll try not to let that compliment go to our heads. Now, let's save your world." "Probe network at 60% deployment," Wong reported from his station. The Prometheus's bridge hummed with activity as holographic displays showed hundreds of probes taking position around the dying sun, each one a point of blue light against the angry red mass. Hayes watched the deployment pattern with growing hope. The combined human-Zarkaxian team had worked through the night, calculating trajectories and magnetic field intersections. Even Mexera had admitted the precision of Earth's technology was adequate. Then every alarm on the bridge screamed to life. "Multiple probe failures in Section 7, Garcia shouted. "The magnetic field is collapsing." Hayes leaped to her feet. "Show me." The main view screen shifted to show a cascade of failing probes, their carefully arranged pattern disintegrating. As each probe went dark, the sun's surface beneath it began to bubble with increased activity. It's not random. Commander Lextai, their Zarkaxian liaison, hissed. These failures, they follow a pattern. Someone has sabotaged the control systems. Hayes's tactical display highlighted the source of the disruption, a maintenance airlock near the probe control center. They're still aboard. Garcia, seal all compartments. Wong, get me internal sensors. A massive solar flare erupted from the destabilized section, forcing the Prometheus to bank hard to port. The artificial gravity stuttered, sending crew members sprawling. Shield generators are overloading, Wong reported grimly. We've got maybe 10 minutes before total failure. Hayes punched up the internal security feed. The lone figure in an environmental suit was working at a control panel, methodically destroying everything they'd worked for. The figure's movements were precise, efficient. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. That's Professor Cavern, Lextai said in shock. One of our lead scientists. But why would he? His family. Hayes cut in, remembering the background checks. They were on the research station destroyed during the Battle of Proxima Centauri. She hit the ship-wide comm. Security teams to Deck C, but do not engage. He'll have failsafes. Captain, Lextay's scales had paled to almost white. The only way to restore control is through the external maintenance array. But in these radiation levels, a spacewalk. Hayes was already moving. Come with me, Commander. I'll need your codes. They sprinted to the emergency suit locker as the ship shuddered under another solar assault. Hayes grabbed the newest Mark VII suit, while Lextai donned the Zarkaxian equivalent. The radiation will fry our suits in 15 minutes, Lextai warned, as they entered the airlock. Then we better work fast. Hayes checked her seals. Ready. The airlock cycled, exposing them to the full fury of the dying sun. They emerged onto the Prometheus's hull, magnetic boots catching hold as another flare illuminated the scene in hellish light. There, Lextai pointed to the external access panel, now 100 meters away across the curved hull. We must synchronize our inputs precisely. One mistake. We die horribly. Hayes finished. Let's go. They began their precarious journey across the hull, each step carefully placed. The radiation warnings in Hayes' suit began to climb. Above them, the probe network continued to fail, each lost probe bringing the star closer to Nova. Halfway to their goal, Hayes' boot slipped. For one heart-stopping moment, she felt herself beginning to drift away from the ship. Then a scaled hand grabbed her arm, yanking her back down. Careful, human, Lextai said. I'd hate to have to explain to the Admiral how I lost another Earth captain. Hayes managed a grim laugh. Wouldn't look good on your record. She locked her boots down again. Thanks. They reached the panel with 7 minutes of suit integrity remaining. Together, Hayes said, positioning herself at one end, while Lextai took the other. Like your grand orchestra. You remembered. Lextay's voice held surprise. Hard to forget a good metaphor. Hayes' gloved hands found the controls. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Their fingers flew across the panel in perfect sync. Two ancient enemies working as one while their star raged above them. They had one chance to get it right. The Prometheus' science lab had become a war room. Holographic displays showed the stabilizing sun, while exhausted human and Zarkaxian scientists pored over streams of data. They'd managed to restore the probe network, but something still wasn't right. The magnetic field fluctuations don't match any known stellar phenomena, Mexera insisted, her fins twitching in frustration. It's as if the star's core is responding to an external force. Hayes studied the pattern of disruptions. 23 years of naval service had taught her to trust her instincts, and something about these readings seemed familiar. Show me the subsurface scans again. The hologram shifted, revealing layers of solar plasma. Deep within the star's core, Hayes spotted it, a regular geometric pattern that had no business existing in nature. "That's impossible," Lextai whispered, his scales paling. "Unless—" "Project Helios," a quiet voice said from the doorway. Professor Cavern stood there, flanked by security guards. The captured saboteur looked older now, worn down. The military's greatest secret, and our greatest shame. Hayes turned to face him. "Explain." "Before the war, our military developed a weapon." Cavern's voice was hollow. "A network of quantum resonators, fired into enemy stars. They would lie dormant for decades, then activate, destabilizing the star from within." The room fell silent. Hayes felt her scar itch as implications crashed through her mind. "You were going to use it on Sol." "The resonators were launched toward your system," Cavern confirmed. "But when we surrendered, the project was buried. All records destroyed. Those who knew," he looked down, "we chose to forget. But we never considered that the test device, the prototype we fired into our own sun, might still be active." Mexera's fins went rigid with shock. "You fired an experimental weapon into our star." "The war was coming. We needed to know it would work." Cavern's shoulders slumped. "When I realized what was happening, I tried to stop your probe network. I thought if our sun died quickly, the truth would die with it. Better that than the galaxy knowing what we had planned." Hayes stepped forward, her voice hard. "How many?" "What?" "How many resonators were launched at Sol?" "3. Cavern wouldn't meet her eyes. "They would have reached your sun 5 years ago." Hayes turned to her science officer. "Dr. Chen, get that data to Earth immediately. They need to start scanning for quantum signatures." She faced Cavern again. "Now, Professor, you're going to tell us exactly how these devices work, because we're not just saving one star anymore." The next hours were a blur of calculations and revelations. The quantum resonators were brilliant and terrifying. A web of subatomic particles that could literally reprogram a star's fusion processes. The Zarcaxians had created a weapon that could turn the galaxy's own stars into time bombs. "We can adapt the probe network," Mexera finally said, her fins showing exhaustion. "Use it to neutralize the resonator's quantum field." But what?" Hayes demanded. "The process will create a feedback pulse. Anyone within 1,000,000 kilometers when it happens." She left the implications hanging. Hayes studied the projections. The Prometheus would have to stay close to maintain the probe network during the neutralization. Too close. "How long to modify the probes?" 6 hours, Lextai answered. "But Captain, your ship will do its job." Hayes straightened her uniform. "Contact Admiral Vexkar. I want all Zarcaxian ships ready to evacuate their system's outer range. And get me Earth Command. They need to know." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "They need to know that the Prometheus is about to complete its mission." She looked around the room at humans and Zarcaxians working side by side. Ancient enemies united by the weight of the past and the hope for the future. "Let's finish this," she said quietly, "and make sure both our peoples have stars to sail home to." Probe network reconfigured at 98%, Wong reported, his voice tight with tension. Through the Prometheus's view screen, the Zarcaxian sun boiled with unchecked fury, its surface a maze of plasma storms and magnetic distortions. Hayes stood at her command station, watching the evacuation ships disappear into quantum space. Only the Prometheus and 3 Zarcaxian science vessels remained, their crews volunteering to stay and monitor the neutralization attempt. "Final ship carrying Professor Cavern has cleared safe distance," Garcia announced. The saboteur had provided everything he knew about Project Helios, then accepted arrest without resistance. "Captain," Lextay's scales shimmered with concern from his temporary station, "the Prometheus's shields won't withstand the feedback pulse. You should transfer your crew to our vessels." Hayes shook her head. "The probe network needs constant adjustments. We can't maintain the necessary precision from your ships." She touched her scar, then managed a slight smile. Besides, since when do Zarcaxians tell humans to retreat? Since humans proved themselves braver than we imagined, came Admiral Vexcar's voice as his weathered face appeared on the main screen. Captain Hayes, you've done more than save our star. You've shown us what we could have been all along. Sir, Mexera cut in, her fins rippling with urgency. Quantum resonance is reaching critical threshold. It's now or never. Hayes took a deep breath. All hands. This is the captain. 23 years ago, humanity and the Zarcaxian Empire tried to destroy each other. Today, we're working together to save both our worlds. She straightened her uniform. Initiate neutralization sequence. The probe network blazed to life, each unit glowing with quantum energy as they began their deadly symphony. The star's surface writhed as competing forces battled for control of its core. Resonator field weakening, Mexera reported. But the feedback is building faster than predicted. The Prometheus shuddered as the first waves of energy crashed against its shields. Warning klaxons screamed across every deck. Hull breach, Deck C, Garcia shouted. Shields at 12%. Maintain position, Hayes ordered. How long until? The ship lurched violently as another blast struck. Hayes grabbed her chair to stay upright. Through the chaos, she heard Wang's voice. Multiple Zarcaxian vessels approaching. It's General Kexti's fleet. The rebel ships dropped out of quantum space in attack formation. Hayes felt her heart sink. After everything, they were going to. Prometheus, this is General Kexti. The gruff voice filled the bridge. Your shields are failing. Allow us to assist. Before Hayes could respond, the Zarcaxian warships moved into position around the Prometheus, their advanced shields interlocking to form a protective barrier. Why? Hayes demanded. Because you taught us that true strength lies not in destroying enemies, but in making allies, Kexti replied. Now finish this, Captain. We'll hold the line. The combined shield network blazed as it absorbed the star's fury. On Hayes's tactical display, the quantum resonator's signature was finally fading. Resonator field collapsing, Mexera announced triumphantly. The star's core is stabilizing. A final, massive pulse of energy erupted from the dying weapon. The Prometheus and its Zarcaxian guardians held firm as the wave washed over them. When it cleared, the star had returned to its natural state, its surface once again peaceful. The bridge erupted in cheers. Human and Zarcaxian voices united in celebration. Hayes allowed herself to sink into her chair, exhausted but smiling. 3 months later, the Prometheus sat in space dock above Zarcax Prime, its battle scars worn proudly as workers from both species repaired its hull. In the Grand Assembly Hall below, Hayes stood beside Admiral Vexcar as they inaugurated the Joint Solar Research Academy. The stars hide many dangers, Vexcar addressed the gathered crowd, but they also show us the way forward. Apart, we nearly destroyed ourselves. Together, he gestured to where human and Zarcaxian students sat side by side. We touched the stars not with weapons, but with wisdom. Hayes looked out over the assembly. Former enemies now united in pursuit of knowledge. Above them, through the crystal dome, their saved sun shone brilliantly in the sky, not as a weapon or a tomb, but as a beacon lighting the way to a future neither species could have imagined alone. The dawn of a new age had arrived.